Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 5, Chapter 8, Text 11. And we are in the middle of hearing about Maharaj Bharata and the unfortunate situation where he had reached a very high level of Krishna consciousness, very high level, completely renounced his position as emperor of the world and was practicing devotional activities in a very, very renounced state at Pulaha Ashram, and was experiencing, there were certain symptoms of love of God manifesting in him. Sometimes he was crying, sometimes he was laughing, different symptoms, bodily symptoms, hair standing on end, and but there was just a little bit left in there with the false ego, that he became attached to protecting a small deer that became motherless at birth. And he allowed that attachment to thinking that he had to protect this deer from dangers, had to see that it grew up. He allowed that to interfere with his spiritual practices, and his consciousness became material. He neglected his spiritual duties and was simply focusing on the material welfare, which is illusory. Material body doesn't last. So he began focusing all his attention on this little creature and his natural affections, which in devotional service, the natural affections need to be in relationship to Krishna. And that is the actual devotional service, is when these natural feelings of love and protection and all the different feelings that are inherent in the living entity are in relationship to Krishna. Then there's no chance of fall down, because one is absorbed in love of God, and there's nothing higher, there's no higher taste. All the authorities agree. Those that have traversed the path successfully agree. And he was almost at that point. He was almost at that point. He'd given up family, he'd given up kingdom. He had no material that you could see, attachments that he was maintaining. And then he still had this little bit of a desire to nourish and protect someone on the material plane. And so this is what we're in the middle of hearing about, how this happens. Ma Om Vishnu Pradaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskitade Satari. Just before we read the verse, that there are extremes, and the extremes are never healthy. In other words, religion without philosophy is just sentiment, and philosophy without any religion is just mental speculation. So to go to extremes misses the mark. So here with Maharaj Bharata, the extreme was that the compassionate activities, Prabhupada explained in his commentary a little while back on one of the verses, was to deliver someone from material consciousness, that is real compassion. Because material identity means suffering. It means birth, death, old age, and disease. There's no way around that, because that's what material is. It's material nature, birth, death, old age, and disease. So real compassion means to raise the level of the consciousness of someone so they can get free from identifying with the material situation, material body and mind. But there is real suffering, and there are real needs while one is in the body, and if one is too disturbed materially, then they can't think of Krishna, because everything's a crisis all the time just to maintain the bodily situation. So there's a system of varnashram dharma. The varnas are the occupations for maintaining oneself, which are materially, according to how one's in the modes of nature and their natural abilities to do things. And then there's the ashrams, the progressive stages of spiritual practice. And the two go together. So that's a very compassionate system. It's a perfect system because it's very compassionate. Because not only are the material needs taken care of and accounted for and managed nicely, but the spiritual needs. So to have one without the other is not going to work. If someone simply focuses on the material aspect of life, how are they ever going to get free from the material consciousness? And if one simply focuses on just the spiritual, if they're not ready to do that, completely renounce everything material, they won't be able to maintain that. And they'll be in distress, because how will they support themselves? And so it's, the two go together. And as a person matures, eventually, like Maharaj Bharata, he reached a point where he could renounce the material completely. He reached that point. And that is very desirable to do that, but not prematurely. One has to be actually, internally prepared to do that. So Maharaj Bharata was at that point where he had renounced the material varnas and ashrams and anything material. And still, because he hadn't completely been able to surrender emotionally in devotional service to the Lord, his emotions got the best of him, and he became materially compassionate. And he actually went to the other extreme, where he dropped the spiritual activities completely. Why? Because he was getting some sort of a taste from the emotions that were coming from serving another living entity. Unfortunately, it wasn't Krishna directly. But Krishna never forsakes his devotee, and there are sometimes obstacles that come up. But devotional service accumulates, it's never lost. Whatever someone does is never lost. Krishna reassures that. Nahabakrama nasosti. Travayona vijite. Svapamabdasya dharmasya tritem tavaya. It's never lost. So, we're getting some very, very, very good instruction here in the life of Maharaj Bharata. So this is text 11. Due to attachment for the deer, Maharaj Bharata lay down with it, walked with it, bathed with it, and even ate with it. Thus his heart became bound to the deer in affection. In love of God, the devotee would be actually doing those things with Krishna and bound to Krishna in affection, because it's the nature of the soul to experience loving relationship and affection. But in this unfortunate situation, he became victimized by the material illusion. Let's see what happened there. Text 12. When Maharaj Bharata wanted to enter the forest to collect kusha grass, flowers, wood, leaves, and fruits, roots, and water, he would fear that dogs, jackals, tigers, and other ferocious animals might kill the deer. He would therefore always take the deer with him when entering the forest. See, the inhabitants of Vrindavan felt like that for Krishna. They were afraid, oh, he's walking on the pebbles are going to hurt his feet, or maybe there'll be some problem, he's in the forest, and they would worry about him. They would have those feelings for Krishna. And just like we experience in family life, the parents have those feelings for the children. It's not unnatural. Those are the natural feelings of the soul, is to have these kinds of feelings. That's why there has to be the material side is accounted for and the spiritual side. Neither can really be neglected. Prabhupada's commentary. How Maharaj Bharata increased his affection for the deer is described herein. Even such an exalted personality as Bharat Maharaj, who had attained loving affection for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, fell down from his position due to some affection for some animal. Consequently, as will be seen, he had to accept the body of a deer in his next life. Since this was the case with Bharata Maharaj, what can we say of those who are not advanced in spiritual life, who become attached to cats and dogs? Due to their affection for their cats and dogs, they have to take the same bodily forms in the next life, unless they clearly increase their affection and love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless we increase our faith in the Lord, we shall be attracted to many other things. That is the cause of our material bondage. So again, it's like the principle of by experiencing a higher taste. It's not possible just to give up the attractions. People are very attached to their pets. Very attached. They're with them all the time. Sometimes they even sleep in the same bed with the dog or the cat. Very attached to their pets. But by cultivating spiritual knowledge at the same time, then one can develop a higher taste. And by developing a higher taste, that taste of attraction to the dog and the cat begins to slacken, and the higher taste of attraction to Krishna becomes dominant. Without that, then the next birth is very questionable. Text 13. When entering the forest, the animal would appear very attractive to Maharaj Bharat due to its childish behavior. Maharaj Bharat would even take the deer on his shoulders and carry it due to affection. His heart was so filled with great love for the deer that he would sometimes keep it on his lap or when sleeping on his chest. In this way he felt great pleasure in fondling the animal. Hare Krishna. Fondling the illusion. Maharaj Prabhupada's commentary. Maharaj Bharat left his home, wife, children, kingdom, and everything else to advance his spiritual life in the forest. But again he fell victim to material affection due to his attachment to an insignificant pet deer. What then was the use of his renouncing his family? One who is serious in advancing his spiritual life should be very cautious not to become attached to anything but Krishna. Sometimes, in order to preach, we have to accept many material activities, but we should remember that everything is for Krishna. If we remember this, there's no chance of our being victimized by material activities. Text 14. When Maharaj Bharat was actually worshipping the deer, or was engaged in some ritualistic ceremony, although his activities, we'll go back, I didn't read that correctly. When Maharaj Bharat was actually worshipping the Lord, or was engaged in some ritualistic ceremony, although his activities were unfinished, he would still at intervals get up and see where the deer was. In this way he would look for it, and when he could see that the deer was comfortably situated, his mind and heart would be satisfied. He would bestow his blessings upon the deer, saying, "My dear calf, may you be happy in all respects." So there he is. He's performing his devotional ceremonies, and it's secondary. Foremost in his mind is his attachment to his pet, to his deer. And the worship of the Lord is secondary. That can't be. Worship of the Lord has to be primary. And everything else has to be secondary. Prabhupada's commentary. Because his attraction for the deer was so intense, Bharat Maharaj could not concentrate upon worshipping the Lord or performing his ritualistic ceremonies. Even though he was engaged in worshipping the deity, his mind was restless due to his inordinate affection. While trying to meditate, he would simply think of the deer, wondering where it had gone. In other words, if one's mind is distracted from worship, a mere show of worship will not be of any benefit. The fact that Bharat Maharaj had to get up at intervals to look for the deer was simply a sign he had fallen down from the spiritual platform. He was getting more of a taste from engaging like that with his pet, with his deer, than he was from meditating and praying to the Lord. Basically, material taste. His senses were absorbed in the deer, touching, kissing, feeding, holding, carrying on his shoulders, sleeping with the deer. His senses were engaged. Certainly there were smells. He must have liked the smell of the deer. Probably some sounds of the little hoof prints. He liked the sounds. All his senses were absorbed in this little creature. And so how could his mind possibly be absorbed in the Lord? There was no taste for him in his ritualistic performances and his worship of the Lord. He's being dragged by his senses. Text 15. If Bharat Maharaj sometimes could not see the deer, his mind would be very agitated. He'd become like a miser who, having obtained some riches, had lost them, and had then become so very unhappy. When the deer was gone, he would be filled with anxiety, would lament due to separation. Thus he would become illusioned and speak as follows. These are all the symptoms that we hear for those who have love of God. They feel separation, they get illusion, they speak in different ways. He fell hard because he had reached such a high point. All of that energy that he had put toward surrender to the Lord, it got diverted. So he fell hard. When he fell hard. Commentary. If a poor man loses some money or gold, he at once becomes very agitated. Similarly, the mind of Maharaj Bharat would become agitated when he did not see the deer. This is an example of how our attachment can be transferred. If our attachment is transferred to the Lord's service, we progress. Srila Rupa Goswami prayed to the Lord that he would be as naturally affected to the Lord's service as young men and young women are naturally attracted to each other. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited such attachment to the Lord, and when he jumped into the ocean or cried at night in separation. However, if our attachment is diverted to material things instead of to the Lord, we'll fall down from the spiritual platform. There it is. Text 16. Bharat Maharaj would think, alas, the deer is now helpless. I'm now very unfortunate. My mind is like a cunning hunter, for it is always filled with cheating propensities and cruelty. The deer has put its faith in me, just as a good man who has a natural interest in good behavior forgets the misbehavior of a cunning friend and puts his faith in him. Although I've proved faithless, will this deer return and place its faith in me? Commentary. Maharaj Bharat was very noble and exalted, and therefore when the deer was absent from him, he thought himself unworthy to give it protection. Due to his attachment for the animal, he thought the animal was as noble and exalted as he himself was. According to the logic of Atmavan Manyate Jagat, everyone thinks of others according to his own position. Therefore Maharaj Bharat felt that the deer had left him due to his negligence, and that due to the animal's noble heart, it would return again. What do they call that? Projection? You project on someone else. You don't see the actual situation, but how you're thinking and how you're seeing things, you project on someone else. Text 17. Alas, is it possible that I shall again see this animal protected by the Lord and fearless of tigers and other animals? Shall I again see him wandering in the garden eating soft grass? Commentary. Maharaj Bharat thought that the animal was disappointed in his protection and had left him for the protection of a demigod. Regardless, he ardently desired to see the animal again within his ashram, eating the soft grass and not fearing tigers and other animals. Maharaj Bharat could think only of the deer and how the animal could be protected from all kinds of inauspicious things. From the materialistic point of view, such kind thoughts may be very laudable, but from the spiritual point of view, the king was actually falling from his exalted spiritual position and unnecessarily becoming attached to an animal. Thus degrading himself, he would have to accept an animal body. Text 18. I do not know, but the deer might have been eaten by a wolf or a dog, or by the boars that flock together, or the tiger who travels alone. Commentary. Tigers never wander in the forest in flocks. Each tiger wanders alone, but forest boars keep together. Similarly, hogs, wolves, and dogs also do the same. Thus, Maharaj Bharat thought that the deer might have been killed by some of the many ferocious animals within the forest. Text 19. Alas, when the sun rises, all auspicious things begin. Unfortunately, they have not begun for me. The sun god is the Vedas personified, but I am bereft of all Vedic principles. The sun god is now setting, yet the poor animal who trusted in me since its mother died has not returned. Commentary. Prabhupada's commentary. In the Brahma Samhita, the sun is described as the eye of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As the sun arises, one should chant the Vedic mantra beginning with the Gayatri. The sun is the symbolic representation of the eyes of the Supreme Lord. Maharaj Bharat lamented that, although the sun was going to set, due to the poor animal's absence, he could not find anything auspicious. Bharat Maharaj considered himself most unfortunate, for due to the animal's absence, there was nothing auspicious for him in the presence of the sun. Text 20. The deer is exactly like a prince. When will it return? When will it again display its personal activities, which are so pleasing? When will it again pacify a wounded heart like mine? I certainly must have no pious assets, otherwise the deer would have returned by now. All of these meditations of his are meant for Krishna. And he's reposed them all in an animal. They're all meant for Krishna. Commentary. Out of strong affection, the king accepted the small deer as if it were a prince. This is called moha, illusion. Due to his anxiety over the deer's absence, the king addressed the animal as though it were his son. Out of affection, anyone can be addressed as anything. Let me read that again. Out of affection, anyone can be addressed as anything. I think there's a popular saying, love is blind. This isn't exactly love, this is blind attachment. Text 21. What is it? Lust means you don't really love the person, but you love the way the person makes you feel. I've heard that described like that. So, whereas love means loving service. Serve the person. Not just materially, but service ultimately means spiritually, on a spiritual platform, which can include material energy, but the material energy becomes spiritualized when it's engaged in the spirit of devotion. So without the spirit of devotion, that's the secret ingredient. That's the transformative ingredient, is the devotion. Otherwise, that's what gives the spiritual life, is the devotion. Otherwise, it's flat. It's like two-dimensional, flat. It doesn't go anywhere. It just stays on that same level of material. With no spiritual life. And the spiritual life is in the devotion. Text 21. Alas, the small deer, while playing with me and seeing me feigning meditation with closed eyes, would circumambulate me due to anger arising from love. It would fearfully touch me with the points of its soft horns, which felt like drops of water. Commentary. Now King Bharat considers his meditation false. While engaged in meditation, he was actually thinking of his deer. He would feel great pleasure when the animal pricked him with the points of its horns. Feigning meditation, the king would actually think of the animal, and this was but a sign of his downfall. So strong, material senses. It's very, very like poisonous serpents. 22. When I placed all the sacrificial ingredients on the kusha grass, the deer, when playing, would touch the grass with its teeth and thus pollute it. When I chastised the deer by pushing it away, it would immediately become fearful and sit down motionless, exactly like the son of a saintly person. Thus it would stop its play. Commentary. Bharat Maharaj was constantly thinking of the activities of the deer, forgetting that such meditation and diversion of attention was killing his progress in spiritual achievement. 23. After speaking like a madman in this way, Maharaj Bharat got up and went outside. Seeing the footprints of the deer on the ground, he praised the footprints out of love, saying, "Oh, unfortunate Bharat, your austerities and penances are very insignificant compared to the penance and austerity undergone by this earth planet. Due to the earth's severe penances, the footprints of this deer, which are small, beautiful, most auspicious, and soft, are imprinted on the surface of this fortunate planet. This series of footprints show a person like me, who am bereaved due to the loss of the deer, how the animal has passed through the forest and how it can regain my lost wealth. By these footprints, this land has become a proper place for Brahmins who desire heavenly planets or liberation to execute sacrifices to the demigods." This is exactly how the footprints of the Lord would be seen. It's amazing how he has completely transferred everything from Krishna to the deer. This is exactly how a devotee sees the footprints of the Lord. These footprints, the land has become a proper place for Brahmins who desire heavenly planets or liberation. O unfortunate Bharat, your austerities and penances are very insignificant compared to the penance and austerity undergone by the earth planet. Due to the earth's severe penances, the footprints, which are small, beautiful, are imprinted on the surface of the fortunate planet. That's meant for Krishna, not for a deer. He's just transferred everything to this animal. All his loving propensities, all his devotional energy. Just amazing. The deer has become his deity. Commentary. It is said that when a person becomes overly involved in loving affairs, he forgets himself as well as others. He forgets how to act and how to speak. It is said that once when a man's son was blind since birth, the father, out of staunch affection for the child, named him Padmalochana, or lotus-eyed. This is the situation arising from blind love. Bharat Maharaj gradually fell into this condition due to his material love for the deer. It's said in Smriti Shastra, "The tract of land wherein the footprints of a black deer can be seen is to be understood as suitable place to execute religious rituals." That's interesting. So the deer are auspicious, evidently. The black deer is auspicious because it's a suitable place to execute religious rituals. So it's not, there is something there, something auspicious in the footprints of a deer. That place becomes suitable. But it's safe to say Maharaj Bharat has carried this way beyond that. Prabhupada says, overly attached. 24, text 24. Maharaj Bharat continued to speak like a madman. Seeing above his head the dark marks on the rising moon, which resembled a deer, he said, "Can it be that the moon, who is so kind to an unhappy man, might also be kind upon my deer, knowing that it has strayed from home, has become motherless? This moon has given the deer shelter near itself, just to protect it from the fearful attacks of a lion." Text 20, this is madness. Text 25. Everything's reminding him of the deer. He's seeing a deer on the moon. Wow. Again, that same kind of madness and illusion is there in the later stages of love of Godhead. We see it with Lord Chaitanya. The sand dunes, he thought that it was Govardhan Hill. The ocean, he mistook for the river Yamuna. And everything reminded him of Krishna. Text 25. After perceiving the moonshine, Maharaj Bharat continued to speak like a crazy person. He said, "The deer's son was so submissive and dear to me that due to its separation, I'm feeling separation from my own son. Due to the burning fever of this separation, I'm suffering as if inflamed by a forest fire. My heart, which was like the lily of the land, is now burning. Seeing me so distressed, the moon is certainly splashing its shining nectar upon me, just as a friend throws water on another friend who has a high fever. In this way, the moon is bringing me happiness." Commentary. According to Ayurvedic treatment, it is said that if one has a high fever, someone should splash him with water after gargling this water. In this way, the fever subsides. Although Bharat Maharaj was very aggrieved due to the separation of his so-called son, the deer, he thought that the moon was splashing gargled water on him from his mouth, and that this water would subdue his high fever, which was raging due to separation from the deer. Text 26. Sukadeva Goswami continued, "My dear king, in this way, Bharat Maharaj was overwhelmed by an uncontrollable desire which was manifest in the form of the deer. Due to fruitive results of his past deeds, he fell down from mystic yoga, austerity, and worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If it were not due to his past fruitive activity, how could he have been attracted to the deer after giving up the association of his own son and family, considering them stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual life? How could he show such uncontrollable affection for a deer? This was definitely due to his past karma. The king was so engrossed in petting and maintaining the deer that he fell down from his spiritual activities. In due course of time, insurmountable death, which is compared to a venomous snake that enters the hole created by a mouse, situated itself before him." Due to past fruitive activity. Due to past karma. Yeah. The seeds are sown and they remain within the mind. And if someone takes up devotional activities and they're no longer acting on the fruitive plane, but they're acting in devotional service, there still may be some residual from past that needs to be dealt with, maybe situated there in the subtle body. And it'll come forward. Sometimes it'll just be minimally, have to be dealt with in a minimal way, just a very small way. Sometimes some of these things are even worked out in dreams when one is sleeping. But sometimes, they'll come forward, and that's what's happening here. There was just a little bit of something left in there, in his subtle body, and it came out this way, and it acted as a stumbling block. But we'll see. This was it. This was the last thing that he had to deal with, and after this was dealt with, he was gone. But say it's left over. Commentary by Prabhupada. As will be seen in later verses, Bharat Maharaj at the time of death would be forced to accept the body of a deer due to his attraction for the deer. In this regard, a question may be raised. How can a devotee be affected by his past misconduct and vicious activities? In the Brahma Samhita it is said, for those who engaged in devotional service, bhakti bhajana, the results of past deeds are indemnified. According to this, Maharaj Bharata could not be punished for his past deeds. The conclusion must be that Maharaj Bharata purposefully became over-addicted to the deer and neglected his spiritual advancement. To immediately rectify his mistake, for a short time he was awarded the body of a deer. This was just to increase his desire for mature devotional service. Although Bharat Maharaj was awarded the body of a deer, he did not forget what had previously happened to his purposeful mistake. He was very anxious to get out of his deer body, and this indicates that his affection for devotional service was intensified, so much so that he was quickly to attain perfection in a Brahmin body in the next life. Okay, well, Prabhupada clears that up. Question is, how can a devotee be affected by past misconduct? When we hear from the scripture, the Brahma Samhita, those engaged in devotional service, the results of past misdeeds are indemnified. So the conclusion that Prabhupada makes here is that he purposefully did this. He purposefully became overattached to the deer. He purposefully used all his emotions and affection and everything on this one living entity, this deer. He did it on purpose. And it was a mistake, but it increased his desire for mature devotional service. In other words, he took the reaction for this, which is a horrible reaction. He had to take birth as a deer. He accepted the reaction, but he had full consciousness of what happened by his purposeful mistake. So there's that element there that a devotee may be practicing, and then it's not like they're victimized and fall down. It's they purposefully fall down. Well, that's what appears to be said here. Fall down on purpose. Willingly drink poison. And his next situation was so bad, the body of a deer, that he became even more determined to do whatever it took to go back home, back to Godhead. So the path back to Godhead appears it can be a little crooked at times, have a lot of curves and turns in it. as we see from the life of Maharaj Bharata. He was very anxious to get out of his dear body, and this indicates that his affection for devotional service was intensified. So much so, he was quick to attain perfection in a Brahmin body in the next life. It is with this conviction that we declare in our Back to Godhead magazine that devotees, like the Goswamis living in Vrindavan, who purposefully commit some sinful activity, are born in the bodies of dogs, monkeys, and tortoises in that holy land. Thus they take on these lower life forms for a short while, and after they give up those animal bodies, they are again promoted to the spiritual world. Such punishment is only for a short period. It's not due to past karma. It may appear to be due to past karma, but it is offered to rectify the devotee and bring him to pure devotional service. Whoa. And there's that saying that if Krishna likes you, he gives you everything. But if he loves you, he takes everything away. This looks like Krishna wants you to come back home. He takes everything away. So it's not due to karma. And there is that understanding that very elevated souls who practice very seriously devotional practices, meditations, austerities, whatever, in the holy land of Vrindavan, they purposefully commit sinful activity. They do it on purpose. Then they get the huge reaction for that. They have to take birth as a dog or a monkey or a tortoise or a hog or whatever in Vrindavan. When they give up those animal bodies, it's so horrendous. Their desire for Krishna is so much more intensified. It's not due to karma. Hare Krishna. Text 27. Well, that doesn't discount that there may be some things from karma left over. There's that too. And they may come as form of a slight reaction, but it'll be very minimized. Won't be devastating. There is that also. But what happened to Maharaj Bharata wasn't karma. It wasn't from past fruit of activity. He'd given up all his fruit of activity. He made this mistake on purpose. He purposely became attached. All right, text 27. At the time of death, the king saw that the deer was sitting by his side, exactly like his own son, and was lamenting his death. Actually, the mind of the king was absorbed in the body of the deer, and consequently, like those bereft of Krishna consciousness, he left the world, the deer and his material body, and acquired the body of a deer. However, there was one advantage. Although he lost his human body, received the body of a deer, he did not forget the incidents of his past life. Prabhupada's commentary. There was a difference between Bharat Maharaj's acquiring a deer body and others acquiring different bodies according to their mental condition at the time of death. After death, others forget everything that has happened in their past lives, but Bharat Maharaj did not forget. According to Bhagavad Gita, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavan jayante kalevaram tam tami vaiti kaunteya sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. After quitting his body, a person gets another body according to his mental condition at the time of death. At death, a person always thinks of that subject matter in which he has been engrossed during his life. According to this law, because Bharat Maharaj was always thinking of the deer, forgetting his worship of the Supreme Lord, he acquired the body of a deer. However, due to his having been elevated to the topmost platform of devotional service, he did not forget the incidents of his past life. This special benediction saved him from further deterioration. Due to his past activities in devotional service, he became determined to finish his devotional service, even in the body of a deer. It is therefore said in this verse, Ritam, although he had died, Anu, afterwards, he did not forget the incidents of his past life as others forget them. As stated in Brahma Sanhita, it is proved herein that due to the grace of the Supreme Lord, a devotee is never vanquished. Due to his willful neglect of devotional service, a devotee may be punished for a short time, but he again revives his devotional service, returns home back to Godhead. Then there's the verse in the Gita that abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me, and I shall protect you from all sinful activity. But there's the other verse, from the greatest type of fear, which is falling down through the species. Krishna protects one from this. The devotee is never vanquished. So it's not like Maharaj Bharata glided back down through the lower species of life because he made this mistake. Now he has to go back down through the species of life and it'll be millions of births again. No. He slipped a little bit and then he rebounded even more. His determination was even more because he had performed all those devotional activities. So this setback, this is kind of like the catapult. You pull it back, like a slingshot. Pull it back, pull it back. You had a little bit of a back thing there, slipping back, and then you got the opportunity, took the opportunity, went forward even more, propelled forward even more, back home, back to Godhead. So if we have setbacks, hopefully that's how they'll sit with us. They'll serve to propel us even more forward. Text 28. Although in the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj, due to his rigid devotional service in past life, could understand the cause of his birth in that body. Considering his past and present life, he constantly repented his activities, speaking in the following way. Okay, so now he's in the body of a deer. This is a special concession for a devotee, even if he attains a body that is non-human. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he advances further in devotional service. Whether by remembering his past life or by natural causes. It's not easy for a common man to remember the activities of his past life, but Bharat Maharaj could remember his past activities due to his great sacrifices and engagement in devotional service. Hmm. 29. In the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj began to lament. What misfortune! I have fallen from the path of the self-realized. I gave up my real sons, wife, and home to advance in spiritual life. I took shelter in a solitary holy place in the forest. I became self-controlled, self-realized. I engaged constantly in devotional service, hearing, thinking, chanting, worshiping, remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vāsudeva. I was successful in my attempt, so much so that my mind was always absorbed in devotional service. However, due to my personal foolishness, my mind again became attached, this time to a deer. Now I have attained the body of a deer and have fallen far from my devotional practices. Commentary. Due to his stringent execution of devotional service, Maharaj Bharat could remember the activities of his past life and how he was raised to the spiritual platform. Due to his foolishness, he became attached to an insignificant deer and thus fell down and had to accept the body of a deer. This is significant for every devotee. If we misuse our position and think we are fully engaged in devotional service, do whatever we like, we have to suffer like Bharat Maharaj and be condemned to accept a type of body that impairs our devotional service. Only the human form is able to execute devotional service, but if we voluntarily give this up for sense gratification, we certainly have to be punished. This punishment is not exactly like that endured by an ordinary materialistic person. By the grace of the Supreme Lord, a devotee is punished in such a way that his eagerness to attain the lotus feet of Lord Vāsudeva is increased. By his intense desire, he returns home in the next lifetime. Devotional service is very completely described here. The constant chanting and hearing of the glories of the Lord is recommended in the Bhagavad Gita. Satatam kitayanto mam yatantas cha dridhavrata. Those who have taken to Krishna consciousness should be very careful that not a single moment is wasted and not a single moment is spent without chanting and remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his activities. By his own actions and by the actions of his devotee, Krishna teaches how to become cautious in devotional service. Through the medium of Bharat Maharaj, Krishna teaches us that we must be careful in the discharge of devotional service. If we want to keep our minds completely fixed without deviation, we must engage them in devotional service full time. As far as the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness are concerned, they have sacrificed everything to push on this Krishna consciousness movement. Yet, they must take a lesson from the life of Bharat Maharaj to be very cautious and to see not a single moment is wasted in frivolous talk, sleep, or voracious eating. Eating is not prohibited, but if we eat voraciously, we shall certainly sleep more than required. Sense gratification ensues, and we may be degraded to a lower life form. In that way, our spiritual progress may be checked, at least for the time being. The best course is take the advice of Srila Rupa Goswami, avyarta kalalatvam. We should see that every moment of our life is utilized for rendering of devotional service and nothing else. This is the secure position for one wanting to return home back to Godhead. Text 30. Although Bharat Maharaj received the body of a deer, by constant repentance he became completely detached from all material things. He did not disclose these things to anyone, but he left his mother deer in a place known as Kalanjar Mountain, where he was born. He again went to the forest of Shalagram and to the ashram of Pulastya and Pulaha. Commentary by Prabhupada. It is significant that Maharaj Bharat, by the grace of Vāsudeva, remembered his past life. He did not waste a moment. He returned to Pulaha ashram, to the village known as Shalagram. Association is very meaningful. Therefore, ISKCON tries to perfect one who enters the society. The members of this society should always remember that the society is not like a free hotel. All the members should be very careful to execute their spiritual duties, so whoever comes will automatically become a devotee, will be able to return back to Godhead in the very life. Although Bharat Maharaj acquired the body of a deer, he again left his hearth and home. In this case, the mountain Kalanjar. No one should be captivated by his birthplace and family. One should take shelter of the association of devotees and cultivate Krishna consciousness. Text 31. Remaining in that ashram, the great king Bharat Maharaj was now very careful not to fall victim to bad association. Without disclosing his past to anyone, he remained in that ashram and ate dry leaves only. He was not exactly alone, for he had the association of the Supersoul. In this way he waited for death in the body of a deer. Bathing in that holy place, he finally gave up that body. So that's very interesting that we're starting to hear now about association, the importance and the value of association. What happened with the deer was, when he was in the lifetime as Maharaj Bharata, he was lonely, and he took the association of an animal. That's what happened. And that can happen with humans also. If we take the association of people in material consciousness, they're pretty much just like animals, because that spirit of devotion to the Lord is not active. So they're living like animals on the animal plane, materialistic plane, identifying with the body and the mind. And if we take that association, then we lose our own spiritual focus, advancement, consciousness. We take their association. So it's interesting here, the verse says, he remained in the ashram. Now he's a deer. He could associate with other deers. Why not? He's a deer. But he's not identifying with the deer body. He knows he's a spiritual being, and he knows what happened. So he's waiting for this lifetime in the deer's body to transpire so he can move on. So he's very careful not to fall victim to bad association. He was not exactly alone. He took the association of the Supersoul. So he's not able to, in this deer's body, he's not able to perform ritualistic ceremonies. He's not able to do any devotional procedures. He's in a deer's body. He can't do any of that. Well, what did he do? He avoided entanglement and trying to associate with others on a material level, and he took the association of Supersoul. And he depended on Krishna and waited for Krishna's mercy. And he realized this was just a little bit of a punishment for his deviation. So it says he finally gave up that deer's body. Prabhupada's commentary. Holy places like Vrindavan, Hardwar, Prayag, Jagannath Puri are especially meant for the execution of devotional service. Vrindavan specifically is the most exalted and preferred holy place for Vaishnava devotees of Lord Krishna who are aspiring to return back to Godhead, Vaikuntha planets. There are many devotees in Vrindavan who regularly bathe in the Yamuna, and this cleanses all the contamination of the material world. By constantly chanting and hearing the holy names and pastimes of the Supreme Lord, one certainly becomes purified, becomes a fit candidate for liberation. However, if one purposely falls victim to sense gratification, he has to be punished, at least for one lifetime. like Bharat Maharaj. And thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 5th canto, 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled A Description of the Character of Bharat Maharaj.